You remember 2008, right? The housing market crash, banks collapsing, and the worst financial meltdown since the Great Depression. Well, buckle up, my friends, because the warning signs that we're seeing right now, well, they seem eerily familiar, but this time it could hit even harder. My name is Steve. Welcome to the channel. And I've been through the chaos of a financial collapse before. Way back in 2008, I lost everything, and I mean everything. I'm talking about going from six figures as a sales director to being homeless. And let me tell you, the signs that we're seeing today, they're just not good. Major companies are slashing profit forecasts, consumer confidence is dropping, and even the Federal Reserve is sounding out the alarm. So the question is, are we headed towards another full blown recession, or is this just temporary turbulence? Well, just before we take a deep dive, it's imperative that you hit that like button and subscribe so you get notified the minute we produce another game changing video that affects your finances. And I promise you'll appreciate it. Now, buckle up and let's dive straight in. So let's start with the stock market because it's been a bloodbath out there. The S&P 500 has been down 5 weeks in a row. That's the longest losing streak since 2022. Last Friday alone, it dropped nearly 1% and volatility is off the charts. Why? Because big companies are warning that things are getting worse. Nike's latest earning report showed that revenues were down 9%, and they're projecting an even bigger 10% drop next quarter. And that is the worst quarter for Nike since, you guessed it, 2022. And it's not just Nike. FedEx slashed its profit outlook again. And this, by the way, is the second time in 3 months. The company's CFO even admitted that market conditions are more challenging than anticipated. What's the translation? People are spending less, businesses are cutting back, and nobody's feeling confident about what's coming next. And speaking of confidence, Americans are not feeling good about the economy right now. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index just dropped to 57.9, and that is the lowest it's been since 2022. Now, when consumers feel uncertain, they spend less, and when people stop spending, businesses make less money, which leads to layoffs. And suddenly, you've got a full blown recession on your hands. And it's already starting. US retail sales for February came in at 0.2%. That's way below the expected 0.6%. And January sales were revised down to a 1.2% decline. That means we basically had 2 months of stagnant or negative growth. Now, here's where it gets interesting because while all of this sounds bad, well, it's nothing compared to what's coming if the Federal Reserve sticks to its current plan. They're projecting slower GDP growth, higher inflation, and well, you're just not going to believe what Jerome Powell said about interest rates. And I'll get to that in a second. But first, let's talk about what's happening globally, because this isn't just a US problem. Global markets are also under pressure. The UK's private sector growth just hit a 6 month high, which is good, but manufacturing is shrinking fast because of, yeah, you guessed it, the tariffs. President Trump just imposed new tariffs on Venezuela's oil and gas exports, and in April, tariffs on Mexico and Canada, well, they're expected to increase to 25% unless there's a last minute deal. Now, here's the problem. Businesses don't know what to expect anymore. Companies like Nike and FedEx are importing products from overseas, but they've got no idea what the cost is going to be once the tariffs hit. Could be 10%, could be 50%, depending on the day of the week and who's in the White House. And it's not just hurting businesses, it's hitting the supply chain. Higher costs are getting passed down to you and me. Now let's talk about the Federal Reserve because this is where things get really scary. The Fed held interest rates steady at their last meeting, but they cut their GDP growth forecast from 2.1 down to 1.7%. And that means they're admitting that the economy is slowing down. But here's the kicker: even though the economy is slowing, inflation is still rising. The Fed now expects core inflation to hit 2.8 this year, up from 2.5. So, what's the plan? Well, Jerome Powell said, and I quote, "We do not need to be in a hurry to adjust our policy stance, and we are well positioned to wait for greater clarity." Wait for clarity? The Fed's whole job is to prevent bad things from happening, not to wait until the economy is on fire before they do something. So the question is, what happens next? Well, if the Fed keeps rates high to fight inflation, we're very likely to see even more layoffs and slower growth. Now, if the Fed cuts rates too soon, well, inflation could spike, leading to higher costs for everyone. And if trade tensions with Mexico, Canada, and China escalate, well, that could push us straight into a recession. Now, here's the thing: we might already be in a recession. The Atlanta Fed's GDP tracker is showing a 1.8 contraction in quarter one. Now, if that number holds, well, we'll officially be in a technical recession by June of this year. So, are we heading for a recession? The data says probably. But the real question is, how bad will it get? If the Fed makes the wrong call, or if trade tensions spiral out of control, we could be looking at a downturn, far worse than 2008. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom, because I'll be breaking down exactly how to protect yourself from a recession in a forthcoming video. So do me a favor, guys, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. In the meantime, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.